I used to joke that I'd live in a cave if rent got any higher. My friends laughed. My coworkers called me the Mole Man. Even my own mother said I was taking the prepper thing too far. But when the storm came, the one they'd later call the burial, my ridiculous half-underground shelter kept us at 12 degrees Celsius, while the town outside plunged to -18. That's a 30-degree difference. And if you stick around, I'll tell you exactly how a plan everyone mocked became the only reason we're still breathing. Hit that subscribe button, because this story gets darker before it gets warm. It started 8 months before the storm, in March, when I lost my lease. The landlord wanted to renovate, which in our small northern town meant double the rent for the same frozen box. I'd been reading too much about off-grid living, about thermal mass and earth-sheltered homes, about how our ancestors survived without furnaces. I had a little money saved, a plot of family land on the edge of town, rocky, sloped, covered in scrub pine, and a chip on my shoulder about being told what I could and couldn't do. So I started digging. Not a real cave. I'm not insane. But I carved into the south side of a low hill, framed the opening with salvaged lumber, built a double wall structure that extended back into the earth about 4 meters, then piled the excavated soil and sod back over the top and sides. The roof was old shipping pallets covered in pond liner, then a meter of packed earth and sod. The walls inside were double-layered, rough planks on the outside holding back soil, then a 15-centimeter gap stuffed with straw bales. I got cheap from a farmer, then an inner wall of plywood. The floor was compacted gravel covered with scrap carpet and foam mats. I insulated the door, really more of a hatch, with foam board and weather stripping, and I built a tiny vestibule entrance to create an airlock effect. For heat, I had a small vented propane heater and a backup alcohol stove. For air, I installed 2 PVC pipes, one low as an intake, one high as an exhaust, both with baffles to prevent snow blockage and wind backflow. People thought I'd lost my mind. "You're going to suffocate in there. It'll collapse in the first rain. You'll freeze by November." I smiled, nodded, kept working. I moved in by late April. The interior space was roughly 3 by 4 meters, small, dim, smelling of earth and wood. But it stayed cool in summer without AC, and when autumn came and the first frosts hit, the temperature inside barely moved. The earth itself was insulation. The thick walls trapped every bit of warmth I generated. I burned maybe 1/10 of the propane my old apartment would have needed. By October, I'd refined the system. I sealed every crack with caulk and foam. I hung a heavy wool blanket behind the inner door. I learned to manage condensation by wiping down the walls each morning and cracking the door briefly to exchange air. I kept a thermometer on the wall. When it was 5 degrees outside, it was 14 degrees inside without any heater running, just from my body heat and a single candle. When I did run the heater for an hour, the temperature climbed to 18 and stayed there for 6 hours after I turned it off. Thermal mass. The earth absorbed the warmth and radiated it back slowly. I told a few people how well it was working. My friend Carla, who managed the grocery store, just shook her head. "You're going to die in that hole, and they'll find you in spring like a thawed-out mammoth." My buddy Joel, who worked road maintenance, made a motion like he was digging and said, "I'll save a spot next to you at the cemetery." Even my neighbor, old Mr. Halonen, who'd survived 60 winters in this town, told me I was playing with fire, or in this case, ice. But I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I was just living cheaply and staying warm. The joke had become my life, and it worked. Then November came, and with it the warnings. The meteorologists started talking about a pattern they hadn't seen in decades, a low-pressure system stalling over the Great Lakes, pulling Arctic air down from the territories, colliding with moisture from the south. They said it could be significant. By mid-November, they were saying it could be historic. By the 3rd week, they were using words like catastrophic and unsurvivable exposure. Our town, population 3,400, surrounded by forest and hills, connected to the outside world by one highway and a rail line that carried freight twice a week, started to prepare the way small towns do. People bought extra groceries. The hardware store sold out of generators. The city crew pre-positioned plows and called in operators from 2 counties over. Everyone figured it'd be bad. Maybe a meter of snow, maybe 2. We'd been through that before. You lose power for a day or 2. You huddle by the fireplace, you dig out, life goes on. I did my own prep. I stocked 2 weeks of food, canned soup, rice, oats, peanut butter, dried fruit, coffee. I filled every container I had with water, 20 liters, maybe more. I brought in extra propane, extra straw bales to block the vestibule if needed, a battery-powered radio, a headlamp, candles, a first aid kit, a folding shovel, a pry bar. I checked my ventilation pipes, cleared them of debris, made sure the baffles moved freely. I told Carla I was set. She looked at my little hill, at the barely visible entrance behind its snow fence and log frame, and said, "If this is as bad as they say, you might actually be better off than the rest of us." She was joking, I think. The storm arrived on a Tuesday night, the 26th of November. It started as snow, big soft flakes that fell straight down in the still air. Pretty, even. By Wednesday morning, the wind picked up. By noon, it was howling. The snow wasn't falling anymore, it was flying horizontally, a white static that erased the world. I stood in my vestibule, door cracked open, and watched the pines across the clearing vanish into the blur. The temperature was already -8. The wind chill was closer to -20. I sealed the door, lit a candle, turned on the radio. The emergency broadcast was calm but firm. Stay inside. Do not travel. Extreme whiteout conditions. Power outages likely. I fired up my heater for 30 minutes to take the edge off, then shut it down to conserve fuel. The inside thermometer read 15 degrees C. Outside, according to the radio, it was -10 and dropping. By Wednesday night, the power was gone across the whole town. The radio said the main transformer had failed under ice load, and crews couldn't reach it in the storm. Backup generators were running at the hospital and the town hall, but residential areas were dark. I didn't notice. I had no electricity to lose. I ate a cold dinner by candlelight, crackers, canned tuna, an apple, and lay in my sleeping bag listening to the wind. It didn't howl the way wind does in open air. It made a lower, grinding sound, like the earth itself was groaning. Snow was piling against the walls, over the roof. I could feel the weight of it, a muffled pressure. I slept badly. I kept waking to check the thermometer. 13 degrees C, 12 degrees C, 11 degrees C. I ran the heater again for 20 minutes, back up to 14 degrees C. I could see my breath, just barely. Outside, the radio said it was -15. Thursday morning, I cracked the door to check the vestibule. Snow had drifted halfway up the outer hatch. I dug it clear with my shovel, my gloves soaking through in seconds, my face stinging. The wind tried to rip the shovel from my hands. I cleared the intake vent, packed snow away from the exhaust pipe, and retreated inside. My fingers were white and numb. I thawed them against my stomach, hissing through my teeth. Frostbite starts faster than you think. The radio was frantic now. The storm wasn't weakening. It was intensifying. A second low-pressure system had merged with the first. Snow was falling at 15 centimeters per hour. Winds were gusting to 90 kilometers per hour. Drifts were 3 meters high in town, swallowing cars, burying first-floor windows. The highway was impassable. The rail line was buried. 2 people had died trying to walk between houses. The hospital was running on generator power, but fuel was limited. The message was clear. If you're inside, stay inside. If you're not, you're already in trouble. I checked my supplies. 13 days of food if I rationed. Water for 10, maybe 12 if I melted snow. But melting snow takes fuel, and I had maybe 40 hours of propane left if I used it sparingly. I had to keep the interior above 10 degrees ICs to avoid condensation freezing on the walls, which would rot the wood and kill my insulation. I had to keep the vents clear or I'd suffocate. I had to avoid sweating, because wet clothes in this cold would kill me faster than no clothes at all. I sat on my foam mat back against the earth wall and felt the cold pressing in from outside like a living thing. But inside, in my tiny bubble of straw and wood and dirt, it was survivable. Barely, just barely. Thursday night, someone knocked. Not on my inner door, on the outer hatch. 3 heavy thumps that I felt through the floor more than heard. I grabbed my headlamp and shovel and opened the vestibule. A figure stumbled in, caked in snow, face hidden behind a scarf and goggles. I pulled them inside and slammed the hatch. It was Joel. Jesus Christ, he gasped. I thought I was dead. His house was 400 meters away, across the clearing. He'd tried to wait it out, but his power was gone, his fireplace was out of wood, and his pipes had frozen and burst. The interior of his house was already below zero. He'd wrapped himself in every blanket he owned and made a run for it, following the tree line, nearly missing my entrance entirely. I got him out of his wet outer layers, sat him by the heater, made him drink hot water with sugar. His hands were waxy and pale. I warmed them slowly. Too fast and the tissue damage gets worse. He didn't speak for 20 minutes. When he finally did, his voice was hoarse. How is it warm in here? It's not warm, I said. It's 13 degrees, but out there it's -18. So yeah, relatively warm. He stared at the thermometer like it was a magic trick. 30 degrees, more or less. How? I explained it as simply as I could. The earth below the frost line stays roughly 8 to 10 degrees C year-round. My walls were insulated and buried, so they weren't losing heat to the air. The small space meant my body heat and the heater's heat had less volume to fill. The vestibule created an airlock, so every time I opened the door I wasn't flushing the whole interior with frozen air. The thick roof meant snow piled on top of it, adding even more insulation. Physics, thermodynamics, old knowledge. Joel laughed, a brittle sound. Everyone said you were crazy. Yeah, you're not crazy. Everyone else is freezing to death, and you're sitting in a fucking hobbit hole at 13 degrees. Language of survival, I said. He stayed. What else could he do? I gave him a sleeping pad and a blanket. We rationed food, 1 meal a day, small portions. We melted snow for water, careful not to burn through propane. We took turns checking the vents every few hours, digging them clear, packing the entrance against new drifts. The storm didn't stop. Friday came and went, Saturday, Sunday. The radio said the snow depth in town was over 2 meters. Drifts were 4, 5, 6 meters high. Roofs were collapsing. The hospital was running out of generator fuel. Rescue vehicles couldn't get in. A helicopter had tried and been forced back by whiteout and wind. People were dying. The radio didn't say how many, but you could hear it in the announcer's voice. On Sunday night, the heater sputtered. We were out of propane. The temperature inside started to drop, 12 degrees, 11 degrees, 10 degrees C. We lit candles, huddled together in sleeping bags, did jumping jacks in tiny bursts to generate body heat without sweating. We sang stupid songs. We told stories. Anything to stay awake, stay moving, stay warm. The thermometer hit 9 degrees C. My breath plumed. Joel's teeth chattered. Started to think about the alcohol stove. But burning alcohol indoors without perfect ventilation is a carbon monoxide death sentence, and I wasn't sure our vents were clear anymore. Then I remembered the straw bales. We pulled one apart, stuffed loose straw into a metal bucket, and lit it. It burned fast and smoky, but it burned hot. We fed it carefully, a handful at a time, keeping the exhaust vent cracked to let the smoke out. The temperature climbed back to 11 degrees C, then 12 degrees C. We burned 2 bales that night, rotating watch to keep the fire alive and the vent clear. It was desperate and dangerous, and it worked. Monday morning, the wind finally stopped. The silence was so sudden and complete it woke me up. I opened the inner door, then the vestibule, then started digging. The outer hatch was buried under 1.5 meters of packed snow. It took me an hour to tunnel out. When I broke through, the world was unrecognizable. The clearing was gone. The trees were half buried. Drifts rolled across the landscape like frozen dunes. The sky was painfully blue, the sun blinding on the snow. The air temperature, according to my pocket thermometer, was -22 degrees. Without wind, it felt almost calm. Almost. Joel and I dug out the vents, restocked the entrance with firewood from a shed we could barely find, and made a run to his house. The door was frozen shut. Inside, everything was ice. The walls, the furniture, the burst pipes. We grabbed canned food, blankets, a battery pack, and ran back. The cold bit through every layer. My lungs ached. My eyes watered and the tears froze on my cheeks. Back inside the shelter, we stripped off our outer layers and collapsed. The interior thermometer read 10 degrees Celsius. Outside, negative 27 degrees Celsius. A 32-degree difference now. Joel looked at me and said, "We're alive because you dug a hole in the ground." "Yeah. I'm sorry I made fun of you." "It's fine." "No, I mean it. I'm sorry." By Tuesday, the town started to dig out. Plows finally broke through on the highway. The military arrived with supplies and medics. We heard it on the radio. 19 dead, dozens hospitalized for frostbite and hypothermia, hundreds of homes damaged or destroyed. The hospital had nearly run out of fuel. The school gym was a refugee center. It would take weeks to restore full power, longer to rebuild. Joel and I stayed in the shelter until Thursday, when the daytime temperature finally climbed to -5, and the sun melted enough snow to make travel safer. We walked into town together, through streets lined with snow walls taller than our heads, past houses with shattered windows and collapsed porches. Carla's store was open, running on a generator. She saw us and her face went pale. "I thought you were dead," she said. "We're not." "How?" I didn't explain. I just said, "I got lucky." But that wasn't true. Luck was part of it. Luck that I'd built the shelter, luck that Joel made it to me, luck that the straw burned long enough. But the rest was preparation, stubbornness, and the willingness to look ridiculous. I'd built something people laughed at, and it saved our lives. In the weeks after, a few others came to see the shelter. Mr. Hallinan stood at the entrance, looked down into the dim vestibule, and nodded. "My grandfather lived through the winter of '47 in something like this," he said. "Dug into a riverbank, burned peat, lost 3 toes but lived to 79. He shook my hand. "You did good, kid." The town rebuilt slowly. FEMA trailers arrived. Contractors came in to fix roofs and pipes. The power company replaced the transformer. By Christmas, most people had heat again. I stayed in my shelter through the winter, because it still worked, and because I'd proven something to myself. That old knowledge isn't stupid, that small and insulated beats big and leaky, that sometimes the thing everyone mocks is the thing that saves you. But I also learned the cost. Joel's house was condemned. He lost everything he couldn't carry. 3 families on our street lost members. A grandfather who went outside to check the generator, a woman who ran out of insulin, a kid who tried to walk to a friend's house. The storm took pieces of everyone. I think about that a lot now. I think about how we build our lives. Big houses, thin walls, dependencies on systems we don't control. I think about resilience, about what it actually takes to survive when those systems fail. I'm not saying everyone should dig a cave. I'm saying everyone should think about what happens when the lights go out, when the roads close, when the temperature drops and keeps dropping, because it will happen again. Maybe not this year, maybe not next, but the patterns are shifting, the storms are stronger, and when the next one comes, the people who prepared, who insulated, who stockpiled, who learned to keep warm with less, will be the ones telling the story. So here's my ask, and I mean this. Subscribe to this channel because I'm going to keep sharing what I learned. Not just about shelters, but about water, food, heat, community, the psychology of isolation, the physics of survival. This isn't prepper fantasy, this is real. This happened, and if you think it can't happen where you are, you're wrong. It can. It will. The storm taught me that the difference between life and death is often just 30 degrees, and sometimes 30 degrees is a hole in the ground, a pile of straw, and the willingness to be laughed at until the moment it matters. Stay warm. Stay safe. And if you learned something here, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it, because the next storm doesn't care if you're ready, but you should.